Hey everyone,
Welcome.
welcome to today's webinar. This is Contractor Designer Relationships, Why Expectations Matter, and how to set each other up for success. My name is Ingrid Velasquez. I am the Chief of Content and Marketing for Fohlio. Some of you may be familiar with me because I may have helped you out with customer support questions at some point or another. I do know that a lot of you are also Folio users. For those who are not and are hearing about Folio for the first time, um, Folio is a platform for architects, designers, engineers, contractors, vendors, and basically everyone in the design build industry. Folio makes product specification easy and effortless, and our software also helps streamline the creation of product schedules, purchasing, and invoicing, things like that. If you would like to know more, please go to folio.com. We would love to help set up a one-on-one demo with you. So today we have with us Capella Kincheloe. Hey, Capella. She's the owner of Capella Kincheloe, business training for interior designers. She has a lot of good stuff on her site. Capella started out as an interior designer for Michael Smith Incorporated. She now runs her own design business, which has led her to working with other designers. And that was actually when she realized that she could make a bigger impact on the industry by running a business course, business training course for other designers. And that leads us to today. The idea behind this webinar is that so I've been seeing a lot of discussions in forums and articles that there's often quite a bit of friction between the different trades, specifically interior designers and builders. And the thing is, not only does it create an uncomfortable work environment for everyone, it also makes it difficult to, to get the results that you want. And like the best possible outcome for your project. So today, Capella is going to talk about how to make it easier for everyone to get along. And if all else fails, how to improve your professional relationships in the industry. Before I hand the presentation over to her, please remember that you can type in your questions in the little question box on your screen, and we'll have answers for you after the session. And without further ado, here's Capella.
All right, thanks, Ingrid. I am going to, let's see, turn myself off and go to the presentation. Here we go. All right, so let's just get started. So you're in the right, you are in the right place if you can identify with any of these scenarios. If you've ever had friction on a project, just like Ingrid just said, so or even worse, maybe some outright hostility from other professionals. You're in the right place if you've ever felt frustrated by other professionals on the project. You're also in the right place if you want smoother and more efficient relationships with other professionals. So here are some reasons for project friction. See, Ingrid, you might, somebody is, I hear a lot of typing in the background. So maybe somebody should mute themselves. There we go. All right. So your project may not be going as smoothly as you like because the professionals and or clients might have different or unclear expectations. So imagine if the contractor thinks that his contact should be the client. The designer might think that the contractor should run everything through them first, and the client really doesn't know what to expect and maybe feels a little bit confused by it all. So this really isn't a good setup for a project. We probably are not going to expect that this project's going to go smoothly, but there are things that we can do to make sure that all parties have the same expectations. There may be friction on your project because of communication. So this could be a lack of communication, or maybe it's just ineffectual or inadequate communication. So when you're performing a job, you have to have professionalism and you have to be an authority. Otherwise, why would anyone hire you to do that job? People are not going to take you seriously or respect you when you're performing a job, but you're not being professional, or if you act unsure of your ability to do that job. You don't really want to give anyone a reason to doubt your commitment to the job, nor your ability to do it. So finally, there may be friction on your project because of personality and ego. Now, this is really the hardest to overcome because you cannot control others. And the topic today really does deal with a lot of individuals, and many have been doing things one way for a long time, or they simply don't know that there is a better way. Everything we're gonna go over today, it's not gonna work for everybody all the time because we can't control others. But part of being a business owner is being able to adapt and do the best for your business and your clients, and still have, maintain your business integrity. So as I go through my tips, I want you to think about how you can incorporate them into your business. And how are you contributing to unclear expectations? How are you contributing to good or bad communication? If there is any lack of authority or professionalism on your part. Today we're going to focus on creating good contractor designer relationships, and it's going to take some effort and adjustment on your part. So before we go into much more, I want to share with you a little bit about my journey and how I came to helping other designers with their businesses. So I started my career with Michael Smith, and I was working on multi-million-dollar projects, including this one on his homepage, which sold for an estimated $75 million in 2013. And it was reported to be the highest price paid for a residential Malibu home at the time. So Michael was a top designer. He taught me everything that I know about design, and I started as the receptionist, and I worked my way up to managing his licensing deals, like this plumbing and hardware line that I used from Callista in a Atlanta Homes and Lifestyle show house, to working as a designer on staff. So here's a photo inside of our offices, and you can see there were several designers, a mountain of plans, design boards, product. So in addition to projects in Malibu, Lake Placid, and Spain, I also had the privilege of working on this special house for this family. But when I worked for Michael, I was assigned clients, and I never really saw how the business was run behind all of the client work. So when I started my own business, I didn't know what I needed to know. I didn't even know what I didn't know. And I knew a lot about project management and design execution, but nothing about running a business. So when I started my own business in Atlanta, there was a big learning curve. Now, Atlanta is a great design town with lots of resources, and I saw knowledge everywhere. So this is one of my very first websites and my first headshot, even though I lived in LA for 10 years. And I became obsessed with learning as much as I could about running a small interior business. So I went to every networking event, seminar, read every book, I read blogs, and I talked to all of my fellow designers. So I'm sure that many of you have experienced this as well, but other designers are really guarded about their business practices. They were really protective of their secrets. So I just started sharing what I learned and being vocal about it. And I knew if I was looking for answers, then others were probably looking for the same thing. And interior design has a bad reputation sometimes, and I really just wanted to change that. I wanted to open it up a little bit. So this was in 2010, when everyone was still feeling the effects of the Great Recession, and I'd had enough with that secretive, closed off, snooty reputation. And I knew that without changing how we did business, designers wouldn't survive if we didn't adapt. So to help, I co-founded a professional organization for design professionals called Design Collective. I started getting asked to speak on panels and at conferences. And I even got a few clients. But these clients were hard won because it took me so much work and jumping through hoops and lost projects just to get a few. So these are some of my very first projects. I think they still hold up today, but I made no money on these, nothing. So then I moved and I had to start from scratch in Phoenix. So just like in Atlanta, I was on a research mission, and I'm the type that likes to know everything before doing anything. So I slowly built my business in Phoenix. I got some clients, but what I really started paying attention to was what I could improve. Like, how could I make my business more efficient and work for me? So I really started systemizing and refining every aspect of my business, which ultimately led me to helping other designers do the same thing. But it wasn't until I started working with other designers before I created some of the process and concepts that I'm going to share with you today, specifically around contractor and designer relationships, because I didn't realize that everyone had similar issues on projects until I started talking to a lot of other designers. I really did think I was the only one that the plumber didn't show up on time for. So what I learned was the key to all of this was to communicate expectations throughout the project in a really clear way. You're going to hear me mention setting expectations throughout this talk. But for now, I just want you to start thinking about the ways that your relationships with other professionals may have tripped you up in the past, and if they could have been helped by better communication. So here are some examples. Maybe you expected a quote much sooner than you actually got it. However, you didn't express your expectation of receiving that quote within 24 hours, and the other professional didn't communicate that it would be at least a week before he could get to it. Or maybe you've gotten an angry call from a client that a vendor left muddy footprints all over the house. However, while this may seem like common sense and something that wouldn't need to be communicated, you could have told that vendor of your expectations of cleanliness and respect of the client's property prior to having them on site. Or maybe your project communication is a mess and no one knows who's told who what and when, and no one is on the same page. Maybe each party felt like it was the other's responsibility to keep everybody in the loop. So I could probably go on and on with these examples, but let's get into the 4 keys to good relationships. So I'm going to touch on these 4 today, and they should make a huge difference in your professional relationships. Remember, we want to remove those reasons for project friction that I mentioned at the beginning as much as possible. So I'm going to touch on those 4 keys now, and then I'm going to go into each a little bit deeper. So the first one is to maintain standards. And by this, I mean that you should have your standards on a project and not let them slip because of an unruly professional. This is kind of like creating some boundaries. The next one is setting expectations. So once you have your standards and your boundaries, you need to be able to communicate those clearly with others working on the project. You also want to then create guidelines. So this is taking that setting the expectations a step further and actually making a more formal system or process by writing down those guidelines. And lastly, you want to make sure that you are executing your guidelines and that you're actually adhering to them. So imagine how great it would feel if your business created and maintained great working relationships with professionals that made your projects go smoother. Smoother projects makes for happier clients, more referrals, more money, less headaches, better efficiency, and on and on and on, right? So let's talk about maintaining standards. First, you have to know what those standards are. And this is through your own internal review of your own business and how you would like to work. So I want you to think about how do you like to work with other professionals? Whose job is what? What are your business standards in working with clients so that when you bring other professionals onto the project, they can help maintain that level of service? What will you or won't you put up with? Are you being a good example to others? Are you also following your own standards? Are you treating others like you'd like to be treated? So what I want you to watch out for is people taking advantage of you or you compromising your business integrity or regularly tying yourself into knots to accommodate another professional without that same courtesy in return. So you shouldn't have to work under those conditions as a business owner, and you are largely in charge of that. On the flip side of that, you also have to show respect to other professionals to get respect. So consider that as well. So I believe that the reason that most projects go south is because of unmet expectations. It is better to communicate more than you think is necessary. And one of the best things that you can say to other professionals at the beginning of a project is that you are both working towards a happy client. That's what you both want. That's where the money comes from. That's where referrals come from. That's where the good photos for your portfolio come from. And that really should be both of your objectives and should outweigh any issues that arise between professionals. So if that isn't agreed upon from the beginning, and really that goes back to what I just said about maintaining your standards, then it's a red flag. You also want to remember that most people are going to be more inclined to meet your expectations if you explain to them the reasoning behind them. Let's say, for example, you could simply say, I expect there to be no swearing on the job site. But if you take it a little further, it's going to have more impact, and explain why. So you could say, I expect there to be no swearing on the job site. This is the client's home. They have children around, not to mention it's a place of work for many people during this project, and we really should maintain a high level of professionalism. So let's talk a little bit about how to set expectations, which really the only way to do that is through consistent, clear communication. Because remember, even when you think you're being clear, someone still may hear something differently. They may have expectations or beliefs that they're not verbalizing, or they don't even realize that they have. So you really want to consider the way that you're communicating. Are you throwing a sentence over your shoulder as you're leaving the job site? Do you take notes in the meeting and then you send a follow-up email with key points? Are you reinforcing your in-person conversation with emails? Are you asking the right questions? Are you expressing what type of communication that you need or expect in return? So here are some examples. Just take a sip of tea. So here are some examples of setting expectations. You could say, to meet our deadline, I need the new change order by Friday. Please let me know if you run into any roadblocks with that as soon as possible. Or, it seems that the client is getting confused and overwhelmed with some of our communications. Do you have time now to talk about how we can make this easier on us as well as them? Or, I noticed that it takes several days longer than I would expect to get on-site details from you. What can I do to make sure I get the most up-to-date information within 24 hours? Or, hey, I expected to hear from you last night about those color samples, and because I didn't, it really messed up my day and I couldn't meet a deadline I promised the client. What can we do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? So let me tell you a little story. Let's say Kim Interiors was hired by the client to remodel a bathroom. She called her tile guy to come give her a quote. The quote was received, good to go. Kim told her clients that it would take 3 to 4 days to finish the tile. So day one goes well. On day 2, Kim gets a call from her clients. The tile guy showed up, he did an hour's worth of work, and then he left. Day 3, the client calls and said the tile guy didn't show at all. Day 4, the client calls irate and says that the tile guy finished his work, but told them that it couldn't get wet or walked on for 24 hours. So how are they going to brush their teeth or take a shower? So this sort of situation is a fairly common scenario. So let's look at some ways that this project could have gone smoother. Now, Kim Interiors could have better prepared her clients by communicating with them what to expect. And this is also really important, like the communication between the designer, the contractor, and the client plays a big role in the relationship between the designer and the contractor. If the contractor or the designer is better managing the client, that makes for a smoother project and it's easier on everyone. So she could have explained that the tile guy usually works on multiple jobs at once because of dry time, that he's also accountable to other homeowners who may have more urgent issues on their jobs. The tile guy could have better prepared Kim Interiors and called when he was leaving the job site on day 2 to explain why. If he knew he wasn't going to be there on day 3, he could have told her that then. If he didn't know at that time, then he should have called her the next morning and just let her know that he wouldn't be there. He could have also told her at the very beginning of the projects that he may be called to other job sites. If there are times that he's not there, to not worry, the work will still be completed on time as promised. So it's always setting up expectations. This is what I'm doing. This is what to expect from me. Kim Interiors could have padded the time, adding a day or 2. It's always better to under-promise and over-deliver than over-promise and under-deliver, because that's expectations, right? If you're over-promising, that's going to be the expectation. And then if you under-deliver, then that's an unmet expectation and people are going to not like that. So Kim Interiors could have also let them know that the tile, when it was done, it would still need some time to cure afterwards. Kim could have also asked her clients if they wanted to pay more to get it done in a shorter time frame. So I find this diagram really helpful in reminding clients, which is setting up expectations, of the fast, great, cheap rules. And then that middle portion of getting all 3 at the same time is a unicorn. It's an impossible utopia. And here's an even more advanced tip, but designers and contractors can also write this all down as a preparing for your remodel document to give to clients. So that's, again, setting expectations, creating a system, creating processes. So here are some communication tips. You want to avoid blame. You don't want to say you did this or you didn't do this. You also want to avoid pleading or begging. It's not professional and it always puts you in a position of weakness. If you need to, create your boundaries and say, this is what's going to happen, and then stick to that. You also don't want to make excuses. You want to show compassion. People are busy, and if somebody's normally great, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Don't fly off the handle for one thing if they're normally wonderful. You want to focus on the solution and not the problem. So in the examples that I gave earlier, they're all about moving forward and what the solution is going to be. It's not about rehashing or going into much detail about the problem. And again, it's not about blaming or pleading. You want to put everything in writing as much as possible. Just keep good records. You also want to avoid fires. And by this, I mean like the I need it yesterday situations. So things like rush orders, on-the-spot quotes, problems, immediate delivery updates. A big component of this is being respectful of other people's time, and just because you didn't get to it or you forgot or you ignored it doesn't make it somebody else's fire and problem to solve. You also want to always show appreciation. So people like to hear that they're appreciated. It also makes them more likely to keep up the good work. And finally, ask for input. So we all have different opinions, experience, and expertise. Including the other professional in your decisions can go a long way towards goodwill. All right, so once you know what your standards are and you can communicate your expectations for the project to others, then you can actually take it a step further and turn those into written guidelines. So this is taking your expectations and creating systems or processes around them. It could be in a simple code of conduct for your employees and other professionals on the project, or it can be a little bit more formal in an agreement or a contract. So the big question, who's in charge? And this is a little bit tricky, but it is something that needs to be established at the outset of the project. So most likely the general contractor is going to be in charge because of legal reasons. And this is because they're the ones that are licensed, and in some states it's actually illegal to perform the duties of a contractor, including hiring and scheduling subs. So you want to be sure to check with your local government and an attorney who knows about this sort of thing in your area. That said, you can choose to work together and have that really fine line that the contractor is responsible for all building decisions as long as they don't impact the design plan or the finished look of the project. And the designer is responsible for all decisions pertaining to the design or should be consulted when a building decision impacts the design. And again, this is something that should be talked about at the very beginning. You're not gonna do anyone any favors by ignoring it until it becomes a problem. So a trade agreement is a kind of a blanket agreement for trades working on a project. It can be used for small projects or large projects, and generally is not gonna change. It's just a really simple document that lays out your expectations for working together. Both designers and contractors can use this when working with other trades, subcontractors, or each other. So in my book, the trade agreement differs from the contract in that the contract spells out things like and gets really detailed and specific about insurance details, responsibilities, scope, payment, disputes, damages, etc. So it's very specific to the project, whereas a trade agreement could be used for any project. And the contract is something that you have more in line with what you would have with a client for that project. And then a trade agreement is just kind of a formalized code of conduct that sets up the expectations for working together on the project. I think of the trade agreement as being more empowering to the people working on the project so that they're all on the same page and they have the same understanding of what's expected. Of course, there's nothing standardized about agreements between contractors and designers, even what the documents might be called. So some people may call a trade agreement a contract, vice versa. It's kind of up to you what you want to call it, what you want to do with it, what's included. So you could have just a simple code of conduct, which would read more like a page out of an employee handbook, or you can formalize it with a trade agreement. Or you could incorporate it all into one document if you're the one doing the hiring and having to specify those responsibilities and scope that would be in a contract. But if you're not doing the hiring, a trade agreement is a nice bridge. So let's go a little bit into what would be included in a trade agreement or a contract. And this really does depend on if you are hiring the other professional or not. There's some legalities involved in that you'd have to work out with an attorney. But if you're not doing the hiring, then the client really should be the one to have a contract with either that contractor or designer directly. So to give you an idea of the tone of the trade agreement, I'm going to read you the starting paragraphs before I go into the details of what's in each of these. All right, so it says, it is Capella Kincheloe Interior Design ultimate aim for projects to go smoothly and efficiently. We want clients to be thrilled with the work of every person on the project. Together we can create amazing results for our clients. To satisfy the customer and to minimize conflict, we need to ensure that we are working towards a common goal with shared expectations and standard goals. For our working relationship to be mutually beneficial and proceed on schedule with minimal issues, we've created a framework to accomplish as described above. So that's how I start out my trade agreement. So here are the differences between contracts and trade agreements in my book. So a trade agreement probably is not legally enforceable, but when done properly, a contract should be binding. A trade agreement would say something like, company and the clients require all trades to keep updated insurance and workman's compensation. Proof of insurance may need to be provided to the designer, client, and/or client's own insurance company. And then the contract would likely spell out, exactly how much that insurance has to be, and it may even require adding another insured to the policy. So in my trade agreement, I don't mention how disputes are going to be handled because it is about empowering people on the project, but in a contract you would have to. And usually this clause would have something about arbitration or where you would go to court. So let's see. In the trade agreement, I also say that we respect the talents and the skills of the trades and that we want creative solutions and input. But this is probably not something I would say in a contract unless I was combining them both into a single document. Something I would mention in both documents, if my company was the one who was bringing another professional onto the project, is I would say that I would expect that other person or company to not accept work directly with the client. Another topic that would be included in both documents, maybe a little differently though, is communication and who the main point of contact is. So who's the main project manager and who's the main client liaison. So my trade agreement has several points on communication. One says, good communication is the bedrock of a smooth project. Trades are encouraged to communicate early and often with company name. We expect trades to be timely in their communications. So that's what my trade agreement says. If this was in a contract, it would probably go into a little bit more detail. I also like to mention in my trade agreement that it's better to under-promise and over-deliver than over-promise and under-deliver. And so this is kind of just like a philosophy that I include in my trade agreement, but I wouldn't mention it in a contract. I also like to go into job site responsibilities in both documents. So these are things like smoking, off-color humor and jokes, swearing, appropriate attire on the job site, and job site cleanliness. So, let's see. All right. So there are some more things that you're probably going to include in a contract that you wouldn't go into a trade agreement. And these things are the detailed scope, who's responsible for permitting, how to access a job site, what's required for supervision on site, the exact dates and schedules, and if there are any delay of project fines, how expenses and payments are handled, warranties, taxes, intellectual property, project management, change orders, how the contract would be terminated or the working relationship would be terminated. So this is very, a lot of this would be very specific to that particular job. But like any legal document, you do want to consult an attorney for specific advice on your business and your local government. All right, so you can't just create these documents and these standards and then not do anything with them. So that's why I added this execution slide in, because if the other professional starts to slip and work is suffering, then you need to make sure that you have a talk with them early and often, right? Always be communicating as much as possible. So it's important to do this early, otherwise it can become a slippery slope and it could be harder to fix down the road. So if you take the time to write these documents and to create these written guidelines, the trade agreement or the contract, and you come up with these standards, you also need to execute them. You need to practice what you preach, and you need to set a good example for all of the others working on the project. So when you notice that they may not be adhering to them, you don't want to wait. You want to have a conversation with them immediately. It also may be helpful to show your trade agreement to the client so that all parties are on the same page. You likely wouldn't do this with a contract because that contract is probably proprietary, meaning it says like how much you're paying and how you're dealing with expenses and stuff, and that's something that you usually wouldn't show a client. But if you showed your trade agreement to the client, then they can be an ally if the other professional maybe isn't complying. So, it would be nice if they helped monitor, let's say the communication situation, if they told either, whether it was the contractor or the designer, like, wait, aren't you supposed to run this by so-and-so first? So you also want to keep in mind, you're never going to be able to fully eliminate issues on a job, but by setting expectations and reinforcing them, then you're definitely going to help minimize them. So as a reminder, always be setting expectations. So here's a recap of those 4 keys. You want to maintain standards. You want to set expectations. You want to create your guidelines, and you want to always be executing. So before we get into the Q&A, I'm going to leave you with this. A rising tide lifts up all boats. I believe that if we encourage collaboration and cooperation in the interior design industry, that everyone benefits. Clients, designers, contractors. So as an interior designer, I really want to share with you all of the knowledge that I've learned about running an interior design business and help you design the business that you really dream of. So if you enjoyed this topic today and would like to have more confidence and certainty, I do have a 7-week business training course for designers that's opening in April 2019, so a couple months. And this is the business course that designers don't get in interior design school. So we're going to go over all of the aspects of running a successful interior design business. So by the end, you're going to feel super confident about your business. I also have dozens of free articles on my website, capellakincheloe.com, as well as some free courses and other resources to help you design and grow your interior design business. But I also created some special offers just for this webinar. If you want to go to my website /webinar, you can take a look at what those are. So I will take some questions now. I just ask that all of your questions are specific to the topic today. So does anyone have any questions? Everyone's good?
Looks like you covered everything.
All right, let's see. I'm gonna turn off my screen. turn on my webcam so you can see me. There we go. All
All
right.
right. Well, thank
So
you, Capella. That was pretty amazing and very thorough. I particularly enjoyed the part about, finding yourself bending over backwards for people that you work with. And it's because on its face, it kind of feels like it might be a gender specific problem because you know how a lot of female professionals will do that. That's kind of the stereotype is that we are seen as nicer and when I was much younger, that infuriated me because, I'm sorry, but just because I'm female doesn't mean you can push me around. But, when I started racking out years of professional experience, I just started looking at it like it's a matter of efficiency and it's really nothing personal. So those were really good points that you made about saying things like, hey, so here's what's going to happen at this time. Give people plenty of warning and plenty of lead time. Here's what we're going to do or not do because this and that. And it just makes it easier for everyone.
I think it's really important for women, especially. They have kind of the imposter syndrome, and to be that authority, because you are. If you're not portraying that and you're downplaying your experience and your expertise, then you're not doing anyone any favors.
Correct. So I see somebody raising their hand. Diane Hewitt. Diane, do you have a question?
I don't know.
You can type that in the question box. But in the meantime, I have something from Anne Marie Brunette. Just wondering if, as a designer, you're not running the project, how much communication do you still do with the trades if the client is hiring directly? That's a good question. Like if you're not the one running the show.
That's kind of something you need to talk to your client about, and if they want you to manage, not like we just oversee the design plan, not necessarily manage the trades, but oversee the design, and that those trades, if they want them to communicate directly with the trades, or if you want to direct through the client, and just let them know, like if it's a game of telephone, it may not be as great. Things could slip through the cracks. So it's, again, it's about communicating. It's about asking your clients what they expect, what the trades expect, if they want somebody to kind of be that liaison between them and the client. Because you are kind of a translator in a way. The design plan goes through the designer to translate into something a little, could be more technical from the trades to something that's a little bit more consumable from the client.
Awesome. Something from our very own Hui Bin Yu. Um, do you put the subs on as employees or 1099 them?
So I don't do any hiring because in Arizona, I cannot act as a contractor. Um, so that's, again, something that needs to be, you have to look at for your own personal, but I don't do them as employees. Trades, if you're hiring trades, they have a company, unless you have a general contracting company, and you are hiring them as employees. But as a designer, you would most always hire them as a contractor, as a like contractor in the IRS's
Right.
terms.
Okay, and here we go from Diane Hewitt. My trades are third-party hires. I help the client with the hiring process, but the client does not know what they don't know, so I get caught in the middle. Um, how do you troubleshoot this?
I mean, sometimes you want to be in the middle to make sure, that they, to go back to the tile example, to make sure that the grout's the right width and the right color and the right kind, and you're not going to see gray grout through marble tiles and things like that. So you may you could do like a project, an extra fee for that, or just charge hourly. And again, it could be creating a system so that when they work with the tile guy, that you give them a list of all the things that they need to know, either from you or just they need to make those decisions on. When I mentioned that you could create that what to expect in your remodel document, that could be something that you could create as well, so that you're not changing it every single time for the tile guy and the wallpaper hanger and the curtain person, the electrician, things. There's no, you kind of just have to figure it out, because there's no hard and fast rules for any of this.
Awesome.
And Ingrid, I'm not seeing any of these questions. They're not coming up on my screen, so.
I'm sorry. That's okay. I'll take care of it.
Okay, all right.
From Matt Betty, how do you source good contractors? It's what everyone's looking for.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error. It's asking for recommendations. You can, look in the back of local design magazines and see who's doing like the different builds, and showing, who's doing the interior design projects. It's all going to be trial and error. That's how anyone has ever found any good people, and who you work really well with may not be who somebody else works really well with. But so that's why, I wish I had an easier answer. I wish there was a nice, database of the best people at the cheapest prices, but that trial and error.
From Becky Morgan, I understand the vendor agreement, but I'm a little confused about the contract. Do you provide a contract to the general contractor? Is this in response to an estimate they provide?
So the contract is if you're doing the hiring, or just, like if it's entering into a binding legal relationship with another professional or with a client. So the contract, if you're an interior designer, then you have a contract for your work and what your performance is going to be on that project for that client. And that would be the same thing if you were working with a general contractor and you were actually paying them and entering into a legal contract with them. If you're not doing the hiring, then a trade agreement is sufficient.
Here we go. From Boriana Griffin. Something we were just talking about. I have a background in architecture and many years experience in the design industry. Currently, I focus on interior design, which I really enjoy, but I still find that the male-female dynamic on the job with the trades can be hard to overcome. Many men still downplay the intelligence and role that women play in both interior design and architecture. Taking a leadership role on the job can intimidate men, and their response can be, at times, like you said, aggressive. Have you found that trade agreements really help with this? I've found that some contractors try to circumvent the designers, we hear this a lot, and tell the client that he can save them money if he does the design as well. How do you deal with this?
This could be a whole nother hour of conversation on that. Okay, so I think again, it's about women being the authority, and not taking any crap. Really is one way of doing it. It's also, if the client brought you on, then they see some value in you, and you can't. If a contractor is saying, that they can do the design, you know, at the same time you could say, well, sure, like I could probably do the contracting too, but I'm not, you know, like, but really not really, right? And that you want to, you know, then you could say to the client, well, if they're going to save you money and do a better design, like, have you seen examples of all of this design that they've done? You know, is this their, you don't ever, I mean, you don't also want to be in that position of justifying yourself. So you need to be able to express your value and kind of talk about what you bring to the project that contractors just simply not gonna know and understand. And let's see, what else? That was a packed question. So I think it's about being an authority. It's about really being confident. That's a huge part. Like, you know, the contractors are going to just do the design that they know. It's not going to be probably very customized or specific to the client, and they just want to get it done as quickly as possible without interference from somebody else. But it just really depends on how much the client sees your value and how good you're expressing your value and your confidence in your ability to do the job.
Very good answer. And like you said, this is a super duper packed question. There's a lot more to discuss on the subject, but okay, so we do have time for one last question. This is from Wendy Blount. I have experienced contract vendors promising a lead time, taking deposits, and then extending the lead time substantially. It threw my last design job into chaos. Any thoughts or tips on how to prevent that from happening in the future?
I mean, you wouldn't work with that person again. It's hard to say. You know, you're taking somebody at face value. If this is just, you know, there's also the delay of getting into the more contract stuff. You could have the delay of project fines. If it's more, you know, from contractors, if it's furniture stuff, then maybe, you know, you don't work with them again. You've done it once, like they had their chance. And I mean, that's really all you can do. That's about maintaining your standards and knowing, like, this is my boundary. I'm not gonna do that anymore. And you can also, like, talk to them and say, like, what, you know, why did this happen? And if you feel like they're giving you an honest answer and there was, you know, some you know, big natural disaster that caused whatever, you know, in you know, halfway around the world, and you know, can verify that, there's always, you know, that it's about having conversations with people and really trying to figure out if they're being honest and helpful, or if they're giving you the runaround, and then you just don't work with them anymore.
Yeah, wish I could get rid of the trial and error part of it, you know, like you lose so much time and money on that, and it's so discouraging, especially when you're new. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's, you know, references, the trade agreement. It is one of those special things I put on my website. You can get my trade agreement for 10% off until Friday at capellakincheloe.com/webinar. If you want to take a look at what that says, and, you know, it's setting expectations at the beginning and saying, this is what I expect, and if you don't, you know, if this doesn't happen, then we're gonna have an issue, and then I'm never gonna use you again if it doesn't pan out well.
awesome.
All
All
right.
right. So that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much, Capella,
Thanks,
and
everybody.
for everybody who
Thanks,
came.
Ingrid.
This has
Yeah.
been very educational. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.